we're back again. This time we've got Luke in Sheffield to my left. It will probably change again. And I've got Alex up in Glasgow, another Glaswegian again. I thought we would just get together to put another call in and talk about the evolution of Air Max. Evolution. And talk about we've got a few points that I've put down. I've sent it out to everybody to go over. We're going to talk around the beginning, so the Air Max 1 and where we are today with the 290. And we've got a few bullet points. I think we're just going to start off with. So, Luke, what's your favourite Air Max model? What have you got with you today?
Yeah, so with me today is probably one of the oldest Air Max that I've got. I'm going to say one of my favourite shoes, and that's the infrared Nike Air Max Lite. I think that the Air Max 1 and the Air Max 90 would become such staple silhouettes, and I sort of feel like that the Lite at times can go under the radar, but for me, like the shape of this shoe, as well as sort of the rubberized elements that we see on the 90, I think it's a great in-between between an Air Max 1 and a 90. And for me, just the colour blocking and the shape of this was just always a shoe that I've loved, and still a shoe that, as I say, this is a 2008 model that I still wear, I'm going to say, fairly regularly out of my old Air Max. And I suppose if I look back at my sort of buying history as an adult, at least, it was originally all very much Air Maxes. And then the second shoe I've got with me tonight is the very predictable Atmos Air Max 1. I suppose for me, it was the first shoe that I really lusted for, that was one that like you just couldn't get. Now, these are the 2017 model. It was like my wife actually bought me this for my 30th birthday, so it holds a lot of sentimental value as well. But for me, it was just a really cool shoe, and I'm a big fan of black shoes, and I just love how the teal pops against the black, and then the elephant print, of course. The only bit that I'd probably change, and I'm a little controversial when it comes to Air Max 1s, I'm not the biggest fan of leather toe boxes.
Okay.
That's the one thing. And if we talk about Air Max 1s, like we have both the London and the Amsterdam in this house, and I prefer the Amsterdam, but I went for the London just because, again, of that toe box. But they would be the big two for me. And then the third one, which I've not got with me, which would be for me the Silver Bullet and the Gold Bullet 97s were just really iconic shoes. And again, going that the more visible air, the better. And certainly since 2017, when my spending on shoes increased again, it was actually the release of the Silver Bullet in April 2017 that really kicked off my last wave of shoe purchasing, shall we say.
I don't think I've ever had that model. Well, how comfortable are they?
Not very. Not very at all.
With that Ams Elephant, Luke.
Yep.
With the features that Joel talked about with the pack with the Jordans, what has this pair got that's different to them? So you had on his pair, you've got the Jumpman on the sole, and as Alex just told me earlier, the elephant in the sole. What have you got? What's it got on this version?
Yeah, so Air Max you can't see that, Air Max on the outsole, standard on the outside, so elephant print guard, black suede, teal, and then on the inside we've got the white and teal insole with the I don't know what that is. It's the A for Atmos. I didn't even realise. So
what's the inners on that shoe? The lining, is it leather or is it fabric?
No, it's cloth.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's cloth. But no, it's just an iconic shoe again. It's the first sort of in the recent wave of shoes, as I say, that like it was just you can't get hold of it shoe, and I don't know why I never pulled the trigger, but thankfully my wife did for me.
Wicked. Right, Alex, what have you got to the table? What have you brought?
Right. Maybe I'm a bit of a basic bitch, but to me, the Air Max 1 is just the definitive runner, the classic one, the one that very much started. I think when you look at like particularly collectors outside of SBs, Air Max 1, that's such a huge like collecting base, such a huge community. And then for me, it's just the sleekest, most perfect design. So it makes sense, I suppose, to pull up the OG itself. This is the 2017 one. I noticed with the 2017, for whatever reason, they don't age very well. I don't think you'll see it, but they crack really badly on the midsole. And I'm still dying for them to one day bring out the big bubble like prototype you saw on the adverts. They refuse to do it for whatever reason, but that would be the icing on the cake if they ever brought that.
It's interesting you say that, because I've got the 2012 and the 2017 pair. Now, the shape on the 2012 pair is horrible when you look at the mudguard at the bottom in terms of its line to the swoosh. But one thing I would say is it's definitely worn better. And again, going back to that mesh, I like on the 2012 pair, it's how it's almost not as shiny as what it is on the 2017 pair. But yeah, a big bubble would be amazing, wouldn't it? It looks a completely different shoe.
Exactly. The issue of Air 1 2005 is the definitive retro. That's as good as it gets. But it's that mesh as well, that anti-mesh, it doesn't bother me. But I know some guys absolutely despise it. But it's like, it's hard to describe, because when you look at like the old mesh they use like way back, it's kind of like almost like chainmail, plastic chain, like loads of little loops.
Yeah.
It's that, I don't know how to describe it. It's comfy, but for cleaning, keeping it clean and that, it's a fucking nightmare.
I know we all talk about retro in shoes and stuff like that, but they've always had that same felt suede, and I almost despise it. I love it at the same time, because it's sort of like it is that model. It's that it is everything about that shoe. But if we were going to retro it again, would you upgrade the suede?
It's kind of hard to fathom the idea though of like a Nike now with that really high quality suede you see on like say like these New Balances or these Roos, the Dia. Whereas I mean it would be magic, but I think it's a bizarre concept to wrap your head around, because I just can't see it ever happening. Following on from that, got the Currys to hand. Now that for me is like the best silhouette of all time, with the great, like the most perfect colorway of tan and white, and it's got mesh. It's great. Yeah. But again, the suede on that is garbage. Absolute shite.
I just had to hide mine because he wanted to talk about them, and now I'm trying to find them.
I did notice they were behind you originally.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. There you go.
Like that's so good looking as a shoe, as a colorway, but yeah, like this whole retro, the quality control was miserable. The whole sizing was like incredibly tight, but I still fucking love them so much.
Yeah, I found that I wear this one with an Ultra Boost insole because it's to make the room. But I got the size. I think this is my true to size. I got a half size up, and it was just way too long.
Really?
Yeah, I found it was way too long. So I ended up having about 3 pairs of this in the end. I was gonna. It's one of those shoes. It's such a shame because it's such an iconic colorway. I almost wanted 2 pairs of them, but.
I had a double.
The quality was awful. I had like the brown had gone into all the laces, and it's just, I don't know. But it's a great shoe to wear out all the time, like if you're going out.
Easy to wear with that colorway as well.
Exactly.
I'm still annoyed with that shoe. Is that there was this impression that it was going to be. It says quick strike on the box. It was going to be super limited. I went down to size at 4 in the morning to get those fucking things. They went on sale everywhere. There was tons of them. So I sat outside size from 4 in the morning by myself, and no one else showed up, and then opened the doors and got my pair. Could have had a few extra hours sleep too. Yeah, for sure. That's the way I looked at it, but I was pretty raging.
What do you feel about the latest release from Air Max? We'll go with you, Alex, first.
Not good, but I think I think I'm overly cynical with these things, and it's funny because we look at this from the view of collectors and hardcore heads, but we're not the masses, we're not the people buying these shoes. And even then, when we look back and say the MX1, etc., we've had 20 years the taste to change and things become retro and vintage. So it's like these models now, like say the 2090. Will, like, say 20 years down the line, we'll look back fondly. I remain unconvinced. I think like it's guilty of what is a lot of these more recent like new Air Maxes they bring out each year, is that they look quite plasticky. It's that kind of trying to look futuristic, but you just end up looking a bit cheap.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. The materials that have been used. I think I commented on one of the guys from the panel in one of their groups that was talking about it, because it's had mixed reviews. It does every year. People either want to love it or they absolutely hate it. How did you feel about the way that they sort of like paid homage to the 90 as well? I mean, you can see it, but you can't at the same time.
It's just like throwing things on. It just doesn't seem that well thought. It just seems kind of lazy, I find. It was my mate who pointed out to me, like, he's like, just took a picture of the zoomed in bubble. He's like, that looks like a fake replica market number. And that's all I see now. Yeah, I think it's still very distant from the Air Max 90, despite the little like kind of homage things. But the masses they're selling to won't care for that. For them, it's irrelevant. And to people like us, maybe they're trying to tap into that nostalgia. I think we kind of see through it, maybe.
Yeah.
I think, for me, like, it's probably not as bad as I originally thought, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
For me, like, I quite like that it's trying to almost take aspects of the past of what we're going to say we liked and then have some sort of direction for the future. And I quite like that there's those links. One thing that really just doesn't sit well with me is the air unit itself. And now I appreciate you can see the outsole, but the shape of it almost looks like a 180 unit opposed to like a traditional 90 unit and the shape of it. And again, maybe that's the direction and that we're moving to. And of course, bigger and bigger air units, as we've seen in 270s and 720s and so on. But yeah, I think actually when I saw them side by side or on top of each other, I could see a little bit more of the shape and how they've almost an evolution. Would I still go and buy it? No. Do I appreciate it a little bit more than I probably did to start off with? Yes. Do I like that they've tried to make that connection to the 90? Yeah. But again, I really don't like this whole air font that they've put on the side of it either. It's just not necessary. And again, we're going to touch upon the materials, but that would be my only other comment.
Yeah, I mean, my gripe with it is the rear end air unit that looks like an old Cadillac, almost like out of the Jetsons.
Yeah.
And we're touching it a little bit later, but it almost feels like they're forcing the future. Like, we'll talk about it in a minute, but so we're going back a little bit anyway. Let's talk about the last sort of staple Air Max you think that was on the market, the one that, the last sort of collector's piece that people still go on about today. I was going to go, we talked about it earlier on, after looking at that beautiful evolution of visible air visual that I sent around. I'm going to go with the Air Max Plus. And we also touched upon the brief stint that the Vapor Max has had recently as well. We're going to go with, Luke, where would you go with it? Where would you say the last Air Max, the last staple Air Max was?
Yeah, I think sort of pre us having a chat, my like default answer, or like it would have been the 97, very much so. And but actually, when we start thinking about it, I think the shoe that has almost done it was the Vapor Max, which did we first see in 2017? 2017, or was it 18?
Not that list, but it was 2017.
Yeah, 2017. That sort of did, and without going, I liked the 1.0 Vapor Max. I thought it was done well. I liked the materials. I liked the swoosh. And then as soon as we got the second iteration and the shape started changing, the swoosh had moved to the back and was smaller, and the materials had changed, I sort of was no longer interested. But for me, like, again, going back, the default answer would have very much been the 97, and sort of, I don't know, there was a DJ back in the day, well, I'm talking maybe 14 years ago now, 14, 15 years ago, a local DJ that just collected 97s. And then I happened to he put his collection up for sale on eBay. I just happened to come across it and noticed his name was his DJ name. And he was selling the Italian silver bullets that I got outbid on. But for me, yeah, the 97 would have been the default. And I quite like that sort of continental European sort of influence. But yeah, that would have been my answer.
It's almost sort of like probably one of the most futuristic looking shoes I've ever seen. But we're talking about a shoe, this many years later, trying to do the same thing, but not achieving that goal. Anyway, we'll go back to that. Alex, where would you go?
Echo similar thoughts to both views. I think the TNs and the Plus was kind of the cut-off point in terms of what you go back to now and people still buy, you still see on feet. And the Vapor Max, again, it's this idea, are we straddling this line between what people suppose the heads and the mainstream? If you still go into most towns in Britain, you'll still see a lot of Vapor Max on feet. And we're still talking, so it's now 3 years later. That's the first version, the second version. Whether that stands the test of time remains to be seen. I think because the Vapor Max, it tried to tap into like kind of sock fit thing that was huge for years, but particularly during the Ultra Boost years. And now we've moved away from that. I don't know if that will maintain. I don't think people will continue. But it remains to be seen. If it's still going 3 years strong and people are still buying it along with like 270s, etc., then it has some sort of, I suppose, stake. But yeah, very much so. The big cut-off point in terms of what we consider the real staples, the classics, the TNs and the Plus is kind of where it ends, I think. It's very much a case when you see 10, 20 years down the line, what's being retroed, what appeals to the masses and what appeals to the heads. We'll see. I don't want to make a firm prediction either way. I don't see the 270 having a history. The 720s vanished into the abyss. This one, I don't have the 2090. I don't have high hopes for either, to be honest.
And I think that's interesting, like the point you pick up on, Alex, about sort of what we've termed heads or like collectors or enthusiasts compared to the general public. Because if we are talking about the Nike Air Max brand as a whole, I'd probably say the 270s had a pretty big impact. It hasn't for me, but I went to a northwest city recently and literally every single person, I'm exaggerating, but probably 60% of people were wearing 270s. They were everywhere. Now really? I go to my local Globo gym in an evening, and so many different, so from young lads through to young females, through to middle-aged males, middle-aged females are all wearing 270s. And that sort of, it seemed to have changed a little bit recently and moved on to the Reacts.
The 270 Reacts in particular, everywhere in Glasgow, everywhere.
I don't want to talk about this point too much because I think it's another conversation for another time. But with the 720, you've now got Travis Scott coming out with 270 soon, right?
Yeah.
Everybody is going to go mad for that. It doesn't matter where you live, just because of everything that surrounds him. You had Virgil with the Vapor Max.
Yeah.
Would that be a shoe that you would pick up now? I know that you're saying you're not really into the Vapor Max, but if Virgil, if they re-release that shoe again.
My wife has the black one, and like she was, I don't know, didn't find it very comfortable. Would I wear as you both know, I really like black shoes. So the black one and the original one, if that came up, a black shoe with an oversized white swoosh is something that I personally really like. But that would be more for the characteristics rather than it necessarily being a Vapor Max, if that makes sense. But yeah, if they came out with another colorway or an iteration of that off-white Vapor Max, it certainly wouldn't be something I'd be scrambling for, shall we say.
Okay, so what about the 720? Now, I know that Undercover have given it a go, failed. Maybe not failed, but didn't look great in my opinion.
No.
They had that like Lakers colorway that was more limited. I nearly bit, but I don't know why. I don't know why I nearly bit. It just was there. I like the Lakers.
Filthy addict, that's why.
I don't know. I don't even follow the Lakers. I just like the colours. Do you see that model going anywhere? If someone really big come along, and could it be revived, that shoe, or would it just be a one-off? Or I don't think, if you're going to use those materials we were talking about earlier on, like the textile that they're using, I just don't see it ever going anywhere.
It almost looks like those squishes, those sweets. Like I don't. There's almost no like depth or shape to the shape itself, if that makes sense. there's no texture to it, and it just looks like a sponge on a huge air unit.
And that's my biggest, I'm going to say gripe again, with the new Air Mag.
Yeah.
The top of it. I know it replicates the mag, the shoe from the original, but it's that futuristic look again. I don't know if that is like Nike's trying to replicate that mag look. But I mean, we've talked about the stable, so let's go on and let's talk about the materials. And my question to both of you is the 2090. Yeah, we've talked about it, what they've used on it briefly. Would people be more interested if they pulled it back? So it's happened with the last couple, so the 720 and maybe the 270. If they change the materials to a more classic mesh, leather, suede combination, would people be more into it? Or is it the whole thing? Or
I'm not necessarily convinced. You're shaping you associate those materials with the retro runners, let's be honest, because if you think about the 97s, and that's got that kind of like, I suppose, futuristic materials, if we're talking about, they're not suede apart from some, but you look at the silver bullets, look at what that is. It, I've never owned a silver bullet, but is it leather
yeah, there's leather, and then running through mesh, and then the 3M running around each bit. And for me, with the 97, I like the layering of it, and then also the lacing system being internal.
Yeah. And that's how that shoe is a perfect balance of a shoe that looks like it's 20 years down the line, but you're using materials that are now, and just the way that it's blended together, it's like the perfect combination of a shoe, for me anyway.
I would agree.
This is a cost, because the idea is generally when they pump out these new Air Max models each year, they are trying to target mass appeal, loads of GRs. Do you think that's a costing thing? Because they're still charging like 110, 120, I think.
It feels to me, for the last, since the 270 at least, is maybe even the Vapor Max to an extent, feels like they're being forced to push out a shoe every year.
Yeah.
Almost testing the ground with these shoes that are coming out. Like, you know, they're not, they don't feel finished to me.
No, and I actually bought into that Nike process with the 270, and I bought the 270 Air Max Day just because I liked the Dusty Cactus colorway, linking back to the 93, and I quite liked how that pulled together. And for me, it was very much, I wanted to see the concept of this new 270, this huge new air unit, and I wanted to feel what it was like.
And what did you feel about it?
It felt like
it had.
Yeah, I wasn't thrown away with it. I wore it a few times and sold it on eBay for next to nothing. If that's the sort of outcome of what happened, but it was I don't know. Again, it's going back to what Alex said about there was very much that sock feel, the lacing on the outside. I didn't like the way that the mesh ran on the outside of the sock. It almost looked like it was going to rip, and I wasn't a big fan of the huge air unit at the back. It felt too soft for me. But
yeah. So I'll link it in. Whenever I'm doing this, I mentioned this last week, it's really hard to stop going into different subjects and try and stay on track speaking about a certain thing. But we're talking about the 270, so I'm going to bring this forward. Right. So LeBron loves Air Max. And I said that last year this is probably maybe a top 3 shoe for me. I've always been into LeBron's like love and the design of this shoe, especially this shoe. But I've always loved his, since earlier models, his love for Air Max. Why? I mean, they're using this sort of like all these like new materials, but they're not forcing this shoe to look like it's from the future. It's this like this lovely like knit that they've got there, this new secret, they're not going to tell you how it's made, battle knit that's hardened on the back, which is ridiculous because it's supporting your ankle, but it's the material, not a cage or something like that has been put in place. There's no strap that's been integrated into the shoe, and they're using, it's almost sort of like, I'd say like maybe a 270 air bubble which goes probably more than halfway on the shoe. How are they doing this so right but the mainstream so wrong with the shoes that they're bringing out.
It's not just the mainstream.
I'm saying that you might not even like that fucking shoe.
You know, I love that shoe.
Yeah.
It's not even just the idea of the mainstream, though. It's the idea of the actual branding and line of Air Max, though. You have a certain association with certain feelings and looks with. Whereas it's funny, though, because the idea of Air, we associate very firmly with Air Max, but it's also synonymous with Jordans and the Air Force One basketball shoes. Yeah. I don't think they're tied into those expectations that we have of the Air Max line, so they can be a bit more free with it, to be honest.
So, with the last sort of like couple of years, the 270, the 720, the 2090, what's next in your eyes? Where would you go with the next shoe, the next Air Max shoe? You've got the direction. You get to tell them where you want to go with it. What do you want to see?
On you go, Luke.
I'm going to say, I like these homages.
We're quite good at telling them that they're wrong now, but where would you, what direction would you give them?
Yeah, I think the point about the LeBron, though, is it's still functional, it's still fit for purpose, and it's using newer materials that still enhance that shoe. I think that's the crucial bit for me. In particular, that battle knit and so on. I think the unit as well, it's fit for purpose. Now, if we're talking about a more of a quote unquote traditional runner and the way it's moving forward, I think, of course, enthusiasts, and I don't want to steal what you said, Alex, but would love a big window, for example, and a larger unit visible. But if I'm honest with you, I think that's pretty cool. But it doesn't do anything for the shape or the aesthetic of the shoe. It's just a cool retro. For me, I think it would be almost trying to move things forward, using some of the more quote-unquote traditional materials, and almost as we've alluded to, not really forcing it upon us, that this futuristic element. And now maybe if the 290 was dialed down a little or was pulled back a little, then it would maybe be a little bit more appealing. But there again, I'm not in marketing and PR, and potentially that's what's on shelves that stands out and moves forward.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know numbers, how much they're selling. They could be making millions upon millions. I mean, we're coming from a very sort of like direct route of that we love shoes, whereas some people just buy them because they're functional or they like that one pair of shoes. What about you, Alex? Where do you see yourself?
I think we're very much at the point where they've gone too far, or there's only so much they can now do in terms of having how much visible air. Like the 720 was the final point almost, unless the whole shoe's a giant air bubble you put your foot in, which is just revolting sounding. I think just even taking like these classic models, say like the 97s, the 90s, or the OG, and just try and rework that slightly, you're going to probably piss someone off. It's a risky game, but I think making a slightly, I don't know what to use modern, because every time I do these modern models, they just look, like I said, these new future kind of crap. But maybe, like I said, applying those more traditional materials such as suede, more mesh, etc., and see how that goes. Because they're not, at the end of the day, they're not runners anymore. They're lifestyle shoes. I mean, I know you see in the gym loads of 270s, but they're not still a performance shoe by any stretch of the measure. So yeah, I think you'd like to see them have a crack at something with those older materials and see how they go with it. I don't really have the faith in Nike to do it, but I like to hope they could at least try. I would even respect them for trying that.
And it's funny because I go back to one of my favourite sort of Nike Air units, and it's more from a nostalgia perspective, was the Spectre. Now, what a crazy shoe the Spectre was, and was crazy materials, almost a similar patterning and shaping to the 97, with this sock-like that wasn't as much of a thing back then, with this rock-solid Air unit at the back, with this strap that came across. And from my understanding or knowledge, that never really took off. But for me, that was just something that worked. And they've clearly been trying futuristic things along that way. And perhaps it requires a little bit more transparency or engagement with the community for those to understand what is actually the purpose of the 290, who's it aimed at, why are those materials being used, because I think that shoe could be better with more traditional materials, but again, like the bulbous element at the back, and with these larger air units, almost this like bubble butt that they've now all suddenly got that we never saw, with this more of a concave midsole opposed to a convex midsole or air unit.
And what do you want to see? What do you want to see in the future in regards to maybe a retro or something like that? What are you looking forward to? I know the Bacons.
That's not going to happen. I don't think. I would absolutely kill to see those back, but I just don't see it happening. I think that was the time to do it, and I think it's past, it's done. Whether those rumours were ever true or not, because I'll hear rumours from a source that's fairly reputable, and he'll get the intel, as it were, from, it's usually the buying catalogues from Nike or whoever. So it suggests that they are going to make these models. So I guess that's where the leaks come from. And then for one reason or another, they just go, we're going to go into other things, which I suppose is business. It makes sense the year of the 90. This year, there's so many great 90s to retro, but I can't really see them going for it. We want a really good infrared. That doesn't look like it's happening. Again, that orange number, which is beautiful as it is, isn't the infrared. A bit of me was hoping for the homegrowns. That's not going to happen. We can dream, but it's not going to happen. Yeah. So because that's the thing with 2020. So I think we discussed it before in the group chat. For me, I wouldn't complain if Nike, because in their kind of lackluster attempt at Air Max Day these days, if they put on an ice till the 40th of the Air Max 1, I would be okay with that. Don't get me wrong, you still have your retros and special releases with all the various Air Max models in the meantime, all those years leading up, but then just go absolutely bananas for the 40th. That would be icing on the cake.
Yeah, what about you, Luke?
I suppose, and I don't want to sound like a broken record about the past. For me, Air Max is very much a nostalgic thing. It's very much about being a guy that was born in the late 80s, that through the 90s were like shoes that I wanted and lusted for, that I'm now as an adult that can now get for. I still and I've spoke to one of the members from the panel from Emil. We've spoken about the Spectre, for example, and I'd love to see a Spectre again, just purely to see what it would be like. I'm quite excited. One of the shoes that I've always wanted to get again would have been the Tailwind 5. And we spoke about earlier about the TN3, were shoes that I wanted as a kid, and our retros of those, then sort of nothing really special or were ever limited, and were pretty big GRs, but were shoes that were, I just remember growing up, for me, the shoe that did it was the 96 Up Tempo, and it was just the more air, the better, and the more visual air, and there was a real almost bigger the better, but now I feel like we've got to a 720 and bigger definitely isn't better.
So pull it back a bit.
Yeah.
I think for myself, like you said, Alex, I think with everything that's going on at the moment, I think they might have lost the whole 90 year of the 90s. I think it hasn't pushed back production now. I think now we're going to start seeing loads more delays, because it seems that there are still shoes coming out all the time at the moment. Like, I think you've got the Stussy that's coming out tomorrow and stuff like that, which I'm going for. But I just think there's going to be delays all over the show with them trying to mass produce these shoes. I mean, there's so many like 90s that I'd love to see. I'd love to even have a pair of the Cork pair that they brought out with the infrared on it. I've missed out on them every time that they've come out. You've got other ones like that. You've got the Cores, the Currys. My best friend has got a pair of the Curry 90s. Absolutely love that shoe. It's beautiful. It's one of my favourite shoes. I'd love to see that. I just was making some notes earlier about other ones that have come out. It's just, there's so many. I didn't realise, like, you got, like the big ones like the Warhawks as well, and the Foot Patrol polka dot ones that they had come out, and there's just so many that I forget about. I was going through StockX, having a look. But I would have loved to have seen the Bacons with newer materials that may last a little bit longer. You got some of these older models that are just falling apart and stuff like that. So I'd love to see that.
To be fair to the Bacons, those OG models, they still hold up fairly well. Obviously, the bubbles go as inevitably they do, but there's a lot of Bacons out there that haven't been soul swapped, and the leather on it is that bit better than, say, the Elephant Retro. It's that older better quality. So they do hold up surprisingly well. They're quite a sturdy pair of kicks.
Yeah. So I mean, I want them to bring it back a little bit. I wouldn't be mad if they didn't bring out a 2021 shoe and just I don't know the best how you're going to bring it back. I'm just not confident they're just not going to bring out another shoe with that textile upper and a 720 midsole cut in half, so it's one either side and looking like it's from the Jetsons and all this sort of thing. I don't know. You've got to hope. There's always hope, but I think we're always going to be clinging on to those older shoes, the older models. Even like, I know everybody hates this model as much as me, but I really enjoy this shoe. And the worst thing about it is that it condensates in the plastic in the middle, so your foot just looks misty. But
it's a matte version.
We haven't come to any conclusion of where Nike's going to go.
Like I said, all the problems were known, the answers. Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
loads of problems. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I love talking about shoe design in general. Like, what were they thinking about at that point in time? Who was their like focus group? All down to the bit of like when we're talking about Adidas and Kanye, like what was he listening to when he made that shoe? Like, you can see some of the designers' processes. I mean, I'm not going to talk about Virgil like that. I don't know what he's been listening to put holes in his fucking shoes, but I don't know the thought process. Like, but yeah, no, I think it's been good speaking about it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again next year and come to the same conclusion.
Conclusion, no conclusion.
Well, just a new shoe to talk about to say that we don't like.
So we're looking forward to some retros. We're not hopeful that Nike aren't going to do it again, and we're still going to keep on buying. So
exactly,
life is good. Life is good. Wicked. Right. It's been good to catch up, guys.
Super. You too. And thank you.
Love it.
Wicked. Right. Well, we'll leave it there. Right. In a bit.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.